So today we've got something special for you. We were going through our videos and realized that despite the many times we've compared other strollers to the Babyzen Yoyo Plus, we've never actually given it the proper standalone in-depth review that it deserves. So that's what we're going to do today, and it's a good time. A good time to reevaluate Babyzen's dominant position as king of the ultra compacts in a time when the market is flooded with competitors. The original concept is Babyzen's, a travel stroller that is small enough to fit as cabin luggage, simple and easy, and as it turns out, revolutionary. It's been 8 years since its launch, and the Yoyo has only gone through one major design overhaul. And so the question today is why? Why is the Yoyo still so dominant? Is it just a matter of market positioning, or is there something inherent in its design that gives it an edge? Is this design beginning to feel dated? Let's kick off with a few stats. The Yoyo Plus weighs 6.2 kilos and folds down to 52 by 44 by 18 centimeters. It can take 15 kilos in the seat and 5 kilos in the underslung shopping basket. We'll get to the seat and basket in a moment, but first we need to talk about the folded dimensions, because this is a crucial part of the Yoyo's success. Originally designed and supported with help from Air France, the folded dimensions of the Yoyo are its primary goal, and despite carry-on requirements differing from airline to airline around the world, the Yoyo is a widely accepted travel stroller built specifically with the IATA, the International Air Traffic Association's guidelines in mind. These guidelines state that cabin luggage should not exceed 56 by 45 by 25 centimeters, and it's consistently mind-boggling to me how many companies build ultra compacts that exceed these parameters. I mean, what's the point then, right? Again, requirements change from airline to airline, but since there is a commonly accepted standard, why not stick to it if you're trying to build a travel stroller to compete with the Yoyo? I'm not going to list all the strollers that fail in this regard, but just know that there are way more that do fail than that don't. Another part of this, in my opinion, is not trying to go too far in the other direction either, and try to build smaller than these dimensions, like the GB Pocket, for example. A stroller this small already has to sacrifice a lot of sturdiness and drivability to fit within these dimensions in the first place, so building something even more fragile just to get it even smaller, when even smaller is not needed, is just unnecessary in my opinion. So, point one for explaining Babyzen's continued success is this then, that they follow the accepted metric, and build as strong as they can within this metric, while by sheer blind luck, as far as I can see, most of their competitors choose to ignore that a fixed standard even exists. Okay then, let's move on and talk about the stroller itself, starting with the seat, which in my opinion is currently the weakest part of the Yoyo in comparison to the competition. It's not that the Yoyo seat is bad, it's just a bit behind in terms of comfort standards in a few respects. Comfort standards are very fickle in the stroller industry, you see, prone to movements of mob mentality and quick judgments when manufacturers fail to integrate the latest trends. For those of you who followed the market over the past few years, note how quickly extendable canopies, rotating bumper bars, full reclines, and one-hand folds move from being just a nifty idea put forth by a single model to expected characteristics or industry standards. In 2012, when the Yoyo came out, there was nothing else to really compare it to size-wise, and so the basic seat was fine. At some point, the canopy was extended with a sun flap, but by the time the Yoyo Plus was launched, there still weren't a lot of competing ultra compacts with better seats. At this point, however, the unupdated seat of the Yoyo is a little behind, most importantly for its lack of an integrated adjustable leg rest. But if they were to redo the seat now, to really get ahead of the curve, the canopy ought to also sit a little higher and extend even further, with a third section, in addition to the sun flap, I mean. Again, the seat of the Yoyo isn't bad. It's perfectly fine for what it's designed for. It's just become one aspect of where the Yoyo isn't top of the line anymore. And no number of extra accessory leg rests and other doodads that you have to buy separately are going to rectify that fact. Moving away from the seat into other aspects of comfort and functionality, the Yoyo is again pulled back into the sunshine. 8 years on, and despite having such a small fold, the Yoyo sports one of, if not the, tallest handle among ultra compacts. Its shopping basket, updated with the shift to the Yoyo Plus, is sturdy, spacious, and accessible. Maintenance is easy as well, with textiles that are simple to remove and wash, and screws instead of rivets at key points on the chassis so that the whole structure can be tightened up if needed. Folding-wise, the Yoyo does not have a one-hand fold, though this could be quickly fixed with memory buttons, but its self-locking two-step fold is both simple and sturdily built, designed in such a way as to avoid the symmetry issues that often plague strollers a few years down the line when wear has loosened the chassis a bit. When folded, the Yoyo has a strong padded shoulder strap, and the drawstring style transport bag is a lot handier than the transport bags provided by a lot of the competition. The Yoyo, like most ultra compacts, is not built for terrain, But granted that you keep to smooth paved environments, the Yoyo is very smooth to drive, with tight wheel mounts and a wide front footprint. We'll get into this more in a moment, but for now, let's start looking at the mechanics of the Yoyo, top to bottom. Okay, we'll start the mechanics by looking at the folding system on the Babyzen. So the way it folds is a pair of buttons here release this single piece handle with the canopy attached down, and then underneath is a very thick, very simple handle mechanism with just like a single safety release button. You pull back, and what that's going to do is release this back portion of the chassis so that everything can slide together. So it's not a one-hand fold, it's a two-part fold, but it's built very, very sturdily for a few reasons. So I pointed out that the handle is one piece. There's just a lot of rigidity here, as well as underneath here. This is also essentially one piece. So you just have that basic fold, and you don't have a lot of points that can loosen up over time, making it so that you have asymmetry issues where one side is going to like click open while the other one's going to be harder to click open, or one part is going to like one side is not going to lock in place at the same time as the other when you're folding it up or folding it down. The same actually occurs with the second part of the fold because it is just one mechanism in the centrally located under the seat, and it is just a basic spring sort of a setup with a pair of very thick like hooks that will hold the back part of the chassis, and then when you release it again, it all folds together. An additional reason for why the whole thing is very sturdy is that you don't at any point have just like a single bar that is riveted crosswise. So at any point where you have crosswise connections, you have very thick sort of connectors between the various arms, and this is actually true, of course, for like the front-back connection points as well. But for symmetry issues, what's most important is that crosswise bars, sort of a thing. So it's not easy for any of the crosswise points to weaken down, which would allow the stroller to fold down or fold up asymmetrically. Now the Yoyo has been out for a long time, so we have managed to see a number of problems that you wouldn't see with newer strollers, because of course after 5 or 6 years you are going to see certain issues start to come to light. So don't judge it too harshly for that, but there are of course some things that weaken, there always are. That thick handle bit can eventually begin to wear down a little bit on those hooks, which will cause some slight movement of the back frame back and forward if people are using the stroller a bit too hard. That is not easy to fix, but it's not something that's so bad that would make it unusable as a stroller, of course. You would have to switch out the parts in order to fix it, which I suppose maybe you could get a hold of. But again, that's not something that's going to occur before several years down the road, and it has to do with how hard you're using the stroller. At all other points on the chassis, if you experience loosening, you pretty much always have screws which you can tighten in order to get it to function tightly and smoothly again. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the lower rear frame then. Babyzen does talk about having 4-wheel suspension. On a stroller of this size, generally suspension is kind of a joke, and what they are talking about in relation to suspension on the back end has to do with rubber rings that are inside this and take away a little bit of the kinetic pressure from that back frame as you're driving over stuff. So I suppose it's a little bit of suspension, but again, a stroller this size, the suspension is not going to allow this to really go on any sort of rough terrain at all. You can make it over gravel and dirt roads for limited periods of time, but generally you want to stick to very smooth paved sort of areas. That's okay though. On an ultra compact, I don't expect a lot of suspension. You look a little bit lower, you have the brake system. Brake system is actually one of the few things that they have patented on the Yoyo, and although there are a lot of other manufacturers who use a similar sort of a brake system anyway. So it's not like they invented it, but it is a very simple brake system. As you press down on that brake pedal, it's just going to rotate a bar inside, which is going to cause those springs to lock into the teeth on the inside of the back wheels. It's like there's no wires involved. There are not a lot of small moving parts that can get damaged, and I actually have never really seen any problems with the actual brake system itself. You can, of course, oil it a little bit from time to time if you're noticing any sort of like hang-ups, but I haven't seen any problems with the brake system personally. One area that does get problems sometimes, and it takes several years, as with what I was talking about with the loosening of that rear frame when it came to the overall folding system. Another area that does get problems over time is the ball bearings, and that is a little bit of a problem on the back wheels here. So you can remove the back wheels. You have to take off this faceplate if your ball bearings have started to rust and break, which would cause the back wheels to be very loose, right? You can unscrew a screw under here and remove the wheel, but of course if you actually have trouble with the ball bearings themselves rusting, then what can often happen is that the inner portion of the ball bearing will rust tightly onto the axle, and then it's actually quite difficult to get that portion of the ball bearing out in order to swap out the rear wheels or swap out the ball bearings. We have a video showing how to do this when that has occurred. It does involve power tools in order to remove what's left of that ball bearing. So that is one area that you can have trouble, but of course ball bearings can rust on all strollers, and when ball bearings rust, they do tend to rust to the axle, and it's a little bit of a pain to deal with that afterwards. If they had removable back wheels, then that would have been easier to fix, but you wouldn't have the same sort of sturdiness otherwise that you have from non-removable back wheels, where it's all integrated into the overall housing and the overall back frame. And as long as you if it rains, don't leave it outside to just stay wet, and maybe oil up into the back wheels a bit here and there. Try to prevent the rust. If you notice it getting bad, you swap them out a little bit early. You don't wait till the last possible second. Then you'll avoid that kind of problem of having to use power tools to replace back wheels. And so I wouldn't consider it like a major design flaw or anything. It's just one of the few fixes that we do wind up doing on the Babyzen Yoyo. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the front end of the stroller then, of the Yoyo, and it does again have suspension. There is a spring built in here. It's very common to have fork suspension in that way. It will not give it tremendously more terrain capability. It does have that built in, so just want to give it its credit where credit's due. There is no swivel lock on the Yoyo. It's sort of unnecessary in my opinion, because you won't be going over the kind of terrain where you would need a swivel lock, just for normal purposes, and you also won't need a swivel lock for what it's very often used for, which is as kind of like a built-in fix for problems whereby the fork has loosened out the inside of the housing and the front wheels have begun to wobble. You don't get those kind of wobbly issues on the front wheels of Babyzen because the front wheels are not removable, and the way in which they are attached within the front fork is very, very sturdy. It involves locking washers and wave washers in order to hold it very tight. I've actually never seen any sort of problems there. So no swivel lock, but also no wobbling problems. That would necessitate any sort of work there. Overall, that whole system is perfect for the sort of terrain that you might intend to drive on with the Yoyo. One interesting feature on the Yoyo that you don't see on a lot of strollers is that the front frame width is actually the widest point on the stroller versus the rear frame. So that's very uncommon to see. And I've been trying to think about what this actually does for the stroller. I would say that this does also limit bumps in terrain to some extent, because where you're going to feel the bumps in terrain are of course at the wheels, and with them wider apart, one side is going to have less impact over the other. I wouldn't say this is why they had built it. I would say number one reason they have built it this way is actually just design and aesthetics. But that is one effect. And a second effect of this, I would also say, has to do with counteracting the sort of like natural tendency for strollers to tip in the back, because it makes a wider footprint in the front, kind of distributing the weight a little bit more in the front, because there's always a lot of extra weight in the back. You know, your child is kind of leaning towards the back, you have the handle. This does not mean you can go and like hang heavy bags from the handle and expect it not to tip over backwards. It will, but it does help a little bit with that overall stability of the general design. Because they're usually built with cabin luggage dimensions in mind, ultra compacts are, in my opinion, still primarily designed for travel. These dimensions are quite restrictive, you see, and this has a huge impact on mechanical sturdiness and drivability, as well as the functional aspects such as the size of the seat and whether it can reverse its orientation. For this reason, I would generally caution against purchasing the Yoyo Plus or any other ultra compact as a daily use stroller, especially when there are so many superior small size daily models out there which will fit most people's space needs regardless of how restrictive they are, as long as one isn't thinking about cabin luggage requirements, that is. That being said, there is an increasing demand in the current stroller market for smaller models that fit on-the-go urban lifestyles that may very well include regular air travel. If this is you and you're dead set on getting an ultra compact for daily use, then there are few models that are built sturdily enough to compete with the Yoyo for longevity. For the rest of you, I would highly recommend the Yoyo as a travel stroller that will function smoothly and should last through all the holidays of your stroller years. This is what it's been precision engineered for since the very beginning. In any case, we hope you found this video interesting. And if you did, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future. Thank you.